Hi there everyone, welcome to the second part of our series, our how-to series. The first part of our series was a pruning video which basically took these vines here in the springtime. We're here in the late fall. I know some people watched it, Mum, Dad, you know who you are. Anyway, these vines are Sauvignon Blanc. We've taken, basically we've run it organically during the year. It was kind of a strange year. We had a cool late springtime, quite a hot late summer, and it's been quite cool in the fall here. So we'll just have a look at the vines. Usually organic vines, they tend to be a little bit, how would you say, not pretty, because you don't put all the sprays on them to make all the vines look nice. If you can see, we had a late, bit of a light frost last night, and you can see that by that browning of the leaves. So it's about time to pick. We can't leave it any longer. So what I've got here is a refractometer, and the refractometer measures the percent of sugar. And the way it does that is you basically put a berry sample on your screen here, put it up to the light, and this measures 23 bricks, so that's 23% sugar. That's pretty good for a table wine, and the flavours here are quite nice, so I'll be happy enough to pick it today. Basically, we ran this as a vertical shoot positioned vineyard, which basically means that all the cordons are run horizontally, and then you've got these canes shoot up vertically. Very simple process. You're basically just picking it, dumping it in the bucket. Repeat. So basically this is what you have after you've picked your bucket of grapes and you've squished them up. As you saw before, we picked these grapes behind us, and then we took this bucket of grapes and we used our hands. You can use your feet if you've got clean ones. In a winery situation, you'd use a pneumatic press or perhaps a basket press. Often the grapes are crushed beforehand, which basically involves them going through a distemmer and then a set of rollers. We're doing it the old-fashioned way. So this is basically what it looks like. This is raw Sauvignon Blanc juice. In a winery, you might want to add some sulphur, or even in an amateur winemaking situation, perhaps some sulphur, which will keep the flavours crisp. It's an antioxidant as well as a antimicrobial. In a winery, you'll often add pectinase enzyme, which will combine with the pectin and settle out. What we'll do is we'll put this in the fridge at about 10 degrees Celsius, and we'll leave it for a few hours so you can see the process of settling. After it's settled, we'll decant that, and it'll be ready to start fermenting. So hi again everyone, here we have it, the liquid gold. So basically what we did is we put it in at about 10 degrees Celsius. In this case it was just in the fridge behind me overnight, and I didn't add any pectic enzyme. Pectic enzyme is pretty available, and it will give you a much better settling rate, maybe even a third of this amount of leaves that you can see here. Basically it's just a white powder. It combines with water, then you add it to the wine, you just dissolve it, and you'll get a much better rate of settling, and that's usually what's done in a commercial winery situation. In our case we're doing it au naturel, so it's basically this is what we've got. So in a winery, you basically settle your juice overnight for up to 48 hours and cool it down to sort of between 8 and 12 degrees Celsius. After that point, we do what's called a racking procedure. In this case, I'm just going to use a little tube. What we'll do is we take the tube into the wine or the juice, and we go just above the leaves. I'm going to go a little bit higher above the leaves this time, just so that we don't get any sediment in the final product. See, it's basically going down, just siphoning down until we get to just above the leaves. That's it. In a winery situation, you would use a electric pump, or you could siphon it or use gravity, depending on what your situation is. That's reasonably clear juice. I'm not sure that I'd be terribly happy with that in a winery. You probably want it a little bit clearer than that. Maybe you'd want to settle it one more day and it will give you slightly better clarity. After this point, we've just got white juice. It's quite cold at the moment, so it's the 8 to 10 degrees. You really want it 10 to 12 degrees and above before you inoculate it with your yeast. If you leave this to warm up, it'll start fermenting on its own. Wine is basically a very natural process. It takes the sugar in the grape juice and it converts it to alcohol and carbon dioxide as well as some heat. In an amateur winemaking situation, you just have your yeast. This is just baker's yeast, but it's Saccharomyces cerevisiae, just to give you guys an example. If you were getting into home winemaking, I'd suggest you use one of the commercial strains that are available at any of the home winemaking supplies. In a winery, there's a multitude of different species, both Saccharomyces bayanus and Saccharomyces cerevisiae are the two most common strains, and then there's a myriad of variations that have different fermentation characteristics. Baker's yeast is designed to be high foaming. That's really not something that you want in a winery situation, but it gives you the idea. When you're inoculating, you would take your yeast and you would put it in warm water at around about 38 to 40 degrees Celsius. Then you would let that just sit until it froths up. In a winery, you manage it a little bit more accurately with temperature and nutrients. After it's hydrated, because it's actually a dehydrated product in most circumstances, you would add a little bit of your juice to it, get it accustomed to the sugar, and then let it acclimatise a little bit more before adding it to your grape juice. Then you have a ferment. During a fermentation, you may want to add some of this product. It's called diammonium phosphate. Basically, gives the yeast nitrogen. Nitrogen is required by the yeast during fermentation for it to complete the fermentation without producing off flavours, specifically hydrogen sulfide, which is kind of that rotten egg smell. If you've got very healthy grapes and you're lucky, you probably won't need to use it, but most winemakers will use it as a preventative for hydrogen sulfide. So here's some of this same block that I made with my son last year, and this is the fermentation vessel that a lot of home winemakers will use. It's a demijohn. It's glass. Glass is a good inert material. In a winery, for an aromatic product like Sauvignon Blanc, you'd more likely use stainless steel. Occasionally people will barrel ferment Sauvignon Blanc, but that's really all up to personal preference. After you inoculate the juice with the yeast, it goes into here and it'll ferment for around about 2 weeks. And you want to keep that fermentation around about 12 to 14 degrees is a good estimate. But really the thing that you want to be looking for is how fast the yeast are converting that sugar into alcohol. A good guideline is around about 0.5 bome a day, or around about 1 Brix per day, something like that. And if you can keep that nice steady fermentation, you'll get good aromatics at the end of it, and it should complete the fermentation. Towards the end of the fermentation, it's always a good idea just to warm it up a little bit. The last maybe 4 or 5 Brix, 4 or 5% sugar. That way the yeast won't struggle to finish the fermentation. When I say warm it up, around about 20 degrees is usually enough to complete a fermentation. You can do this by putting it somewhere warm in your house, or in a winery you may use warm glycol plates to heat up the tank. The fermentation gases, which are primarily carbon dioxide, are released through this little airlock here. It's a silicon stopper, and the gases are able to release out the top. After the fermentation, the yeast will naturally settle to the bottom, at which point you have a choice. You can put it through a secondary fermentation, which is where you add malolactic bacteria. This will convert some of the malic acid into lactic acid, which is a softer acid, and will give you a little bit more creamy flavour. I don't really like doing that with Sauvignon Blanc because you do lose some of those primary fruity aromas. The best way to stop it from going through that fermentation naturally is to add a little bit of sulfur. In this case, I've got the sulfur as a salt. It's called potassium metabite sulfate. I'll give you a look at what last year's version looked like. Again, clean my racking tube. It ends up very clear when it's sitting. This is just going to be bottled, so it's exactly 1 year old. Bob's your uncle. Enjoy.